GamesRadar published a great interview with Destiny 2 game director Joe Blackburn and assistant general manager Dan McAuliffe, where they discuss story, grappling with the new darkness subclass Strand, stopping sunsetting the new player experience with Guardian ranks, and also experimenting with fixing power levels in the future. Well, today I'm going to bring you that interview in full, so you get the lowdown on everything coming to Destiny 2. Well, if you're new around here or find this useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for all the latest Destiny 2 content and turn on notifications by hitting that bell. And roughly 98% of viewers who watch This Week in Video Games aren't subscribed, so subscribe today and never miss an update. Well, first of all, massive thank you to Austin Wood from GamesRadar who did the interview, and make sure to head on over to GamesRadar and check out their great content. I do have a link down below in the description for your convenience. Well, without delay, let's dive right into that interview. So Austin says Destiny 2 is in a weird but wonderful spot. So after the big August 23rd showcase, the Lightfall expansion coming February 28th, 2023 is on everyone's minds. So Callus and the Witness are bringing an army of the darkness to the Neptunian city of Neo Muna, and we're going to make them head on, brandishing the never-before-seen power of Strand. Yet, in the live game, we're all running around playing pirates and shooting lightning out of our fingertips. This so far silly, swashbuckling season has given players a chance to mull over the massive changes announced at the Lightfall reveal event. Long requested features like save loadouts and in-game LFG, they're finally coming next year. The new Guardian rank and commendation systems promise to revamp new player and multiplayer experiences. And perhaps most importantly, Bungie says it won't be sunsetting any more expansions post-Forsaken. Well, there's a lot to take in, so I sat down with Destiny 2 game director Joe Blackburn and assistant general manager Dan McAuliffe to drill into the biggest beats of Lightfall and beyond. Well, Austin asked his first question here, and he says there's an interesting contrast between Callus, the co-villain of Lightfall, and Eramis, the big bad of the current season and the Beyond Light expansion. For years, virtually every Destiny villain was a lot like Eramis, someone who existed solely to drive a short plot to the finish line. Bungie only truly broke out of this frame in the Witch Queen, with the scars left by Savathun's scheming. Callus precedes the storytelling overhaul that recently elevated the game, but Blackburn says Bungie's been planning a big role for the Cabal Enigma for years. By finally returning to Callus in a big way, Bungie hopes to pay off one of Destiny 2's earliest story commitments. We don't want to keep the doors open forever, Blackburn says, of Callus's long character arc. We don't want to leave you hanging, we eventually want to make good on that promise. And Callus was really one of the first long-term promises we made. In Lightfall, we want to go with this big blockbuster action fantasy, Blackburn explains. When that comes up, when we start looking at the narrative roadmap and we say, okay, what's going to help us here? Well, we've got the Witness, and the Witness has this specific stoic personality, and we need a big boisterous villain as well. So this is the Callus release. This is where we're going to have him, and they really foil each other well. So while Lightfall features some familiar faces, it takes place in a totally unfamiliar setting. Neo Muna's cyberpunk culture looks more like Cyberpunk 2077's Night City than Destiny 2's Last City. And after the Lightfall showcase, I remember seeing reactions like, this doesn't look like Destiny, or I don't even recognise this game. And that is kind of the point. Bungie isn't rewriting Destiny's visual identity, but it is playing with it. The Guardian silhouettes, the form of the Ghost, and a lot of iconic weapon silhouettes and things like that, they're all very centred around the core aesthetic of Destiny. But the world that Destiny exists in is not just the Last City, it's not just the tower. I think it's important to show the variety that exists in the world, both as a change to the eye as a backdrop, but also to tell the environmental story of what's happening in this entire solar system. We're very focused on moments in time, but there's all these other things happening. Neo Muna is a wonderful example. This city has always been around, and now we are only just finding it. What would be different in that world? In a city that was sheltered from the Great War, well, you were going to see it. We're always on some sort of sliding scale between the core Destiny fantasy of knights in space, wizards in robes, and how broad the universe is, adds Joe Blackburn. When you look at something like Lightfall, we really thought a lot about the player fantasy. So what is the action hero Destiny character look like? We started to pull some inspiration from things like Legend of Korra, where you're not just the gun guy, you're also the mystic super soldier. Well, next up, we're going to dig into the grappling hook a little bit more. So Strand is the focus of a mystic super soldier fantasy of Lightfall, and it's unlike any previous Guardian ability. Strand is all about grasping unseen power and weaving it into a desired shape, one of those shapes being a sick-ass grappling hook that I had a million questions about. So the Strand grappling hook sits in the grenade slot and is identical across all classes, though Blackburn teased that aspects and fragments can alter it. Curious about the offensive abilities of this thing, I mentioned the glorious meat hook of Doom Eternal's super shotgun, and Blackburn says the Strand grapple is a tool to move the player, not to move enemies. Likewise, to keep the sandbox from going absolutely off the walls, the base cooldown of the grappling hook won't allow for non-stop Spider-Man style swinging, though there are some Strand grapple points in Neo Muna that will instantly reset your grapple cooldown to enable exploration. Because it's in the grenade slot, we made sure there's some offensive capabilities with grapple, Blackburn assures me. If you're the kind of person who wants to grapple in, there's a finisher on the grapple that you can do. Now I'm going to go in, F somebody up at the end of the grapple, I'm going to pull out my shotgun, and some Guardians are going to use this to do an escape, some Guardians are going to use this to be aggressive. You know, what is that going to mean? Why would you take a grapple over a different Strand grenade? Well, Bungie is also trying to answer a bigger question surrounding the grapple. You know, won't it kind of break the game? Every pre-Lightfall environment wasn't designed with a grapple hook in mind, and Destiny PvP definitely wasn't. So as someone who's written at length about the upsides of adding grapple hooks to basically any game, I do admittedly have to wonder how you actually balance for that. Well, I'm always worried about breaking the game, McAuliffe jokes, especially when you add something as ambitious as a new movement ability, and one that we intend to extend across the entire game. So I've got a lot of faith in our team's ability to test and vet that sort of thing. I'm probably most not nervous, but excited to see what kind of utility it has in PvP. As with everything else that's introduced, it's going to bring a change to the sandbox, and we are going to react to it. So if you can imagine doing past raids and thinking, yeah, maybe I want Strand in the jumping section because that is a struggle for me, adds Blackburn, well, we like that, but we also do not want building in the game where players either haven't earned Strand or, you know, just like running solo, they feel pulled. You know, we're really thinking about balance here. So there are some really cool moments you can accomplish with Strand. I was playing with this thing recently where there's this effing BS thing that traps between me and where I wanted to go. And I'm watching Robbie Stevens, our assistant game director, hobble through the traps, and I'm like, nah, you know, I think I'm just going to use my grapple. Well, next up, they talk about sunsetting. So Destiny expansions are always about more than just new content, and that seems especially true for Lightfall, which is set to make sweeping systematic changes. You know, one of Bungie's biggest promises here is the end of expansion sunsetting. You know, seasonal content will still rotate out on an annual basis, but the team's apparently made enough engine improvements to keep the bones of the Light and the Darkness saga, beginning with Shadowkeep and ending with the final shape in the game all at once. And on top of preserving the story, this will take a lot of the sting out of the Destiny content vault, which most recently consumed the Forsaken expansion in the name of game stability. Now, it's always been my read that the DCV came about because Destiny 2, which began when Bungie was still working on a franchise roadmap under Activision, simply wasn't built for the lifespan and developmental cycle it's fallen into. Basically, Bungie had to eject something to keep the whole game from crashing. You know, nobody actually wanted to see the content cut from the game, though as an active player I'd be lying if I actually said I'd missed much of it, but it was the best of the bad solutions. Well, that is not off the mark, McAuliffe responds. You asked how this came about, and it came about because we really need to put the player experience first. The technical limitations and the decisions made around sunsetting weren't received in the way we wanted them to be. Especially as we start down this path on finishing this saga, it's really important that players, new or veteran, can play through the story from the start to the finish. You know, we've been working behind the scenes to try and prepare the game for that, and to your exact read, it wasn't designed for this. So I don't know if any game was designed for the content volume that Destiny produces, and we're still working on it. We believe that we have a good path to keep these things going, but our work is never done. We're always going to be weighing up the awesome content we want to put in the game against the inoperable systems and the giant binary sizes, which are also bad for player experiences after a fashion. So the way that we're getting through this is a lot of very painful choices that we make every single month with a lot of people working on it, Blackburn says, when I ask about unvaulting and old campaigns and expansions. It's not that we uncovered some golden bullet. Great, you know, we can do it all now. The thought of going back and putting in a bunch of stuff and asking a bunch of people that already lifted a very hairy burden, like, could you just lift twice as much? We're still exploring, we're trying to make improvements to make that easier, so we're really happy with working to stop sunsetting content, but we have not doubled the effort to figure out how to make it all work. So we haven't solved the problem, and I don't think it's a singular problem, McAuliffe says, but we're committed to solving it, both from the choices that Joe was talking about as well as just investment. We're putting more resources on it, and we're working to bolster the engine team to solve these issues to keep as much of the content that players love in the game. Well, next up, we're going to talk about the new player experience, so sunsetting rankled hardcore players by removing content that they paid for, and it also put off new players by making it even harder to get into the impenetrable grindathon that is Destiny 2. Preserving expansions will help out the latter issue, but as the last few seasons have demonstrated, and Bungie have admitted that the Lightfall showcase, so learning Destiny 2 can be as difficult as learning a new language, and like learning a new language, it helps to learn with somebody fluent by your side. But the so-called friend game hasn't solved Destiny 2's onboarding problem so far. With Lightfall and the seasons following it, Bungie hopes to finally give new players the guidance they need to get their head around this mammoth game, and Guardian ranks are central to this push. We're not going to ask you to play 400 hours of old content to be able to play with your friends, Blackburn begins, comparing Destiny 2's new player experience to other MMOs. Our time to participate in the latest content is really fast. I think the most challenging thing we've got to start making headway is if we've got a ton of narrative in Destiny 2, and it can feel really daunting. All my friends know this stuff and all these characters and I don't, so what is not the solution is to say go back and play 100 hours or 200 hours of Destiny. We really want to be looking at the future and how to offer you ways to get the exact information that you need. It's going to be a big lift from us, but it's definitely on our radar, and if we can get you into the systems, then we've got to get you into the story too. For us, the primary question that Guardian Ranks answer for new players is, what should I be doing in this game? You'll see it shows up in the director of this journey. Oh, this is really important. Yes, this is really important. It's going to help you understand how these systems work together. So it's going to push you into harder and harder content. And once you get to rank 4, rank 5, we're going to see that you understand how guns work, how you've made a few builds, you've played a Lost Sector, you've done a campaign, and you could probably try a Nightfall now. Maybe try a harder Nightfall, maybe you should try a dungeon. So we want it to operate as a ladder, getting you to harder content. So by introducing and tracking new activities, Guardian Ranks will also tie directly to the upcoming Looking For group system. So every LFG tool we've seen that's failed has not been able to deliver the promise of, do I know this person is ready for this activity? And that's what we want with Guardian Ranks, and that's what we want Guardian Ranks to do, provide you that confidence, Blackburn says. He also tells me that Bungie hopes, not necessarily plans, to add LFG with the release of the next reprised Destiny 1 raid, which should be sometime in mid-2023. It won't be ready for Lightfall, but they are supremely confident it's going to be ready before the final shape, and they want to get some time with it beforehand to work out the kinks. So in a few years, we may look back on Guardian Ranks as the precursor to the revamped progression in Destiny 2, and I asked about the power level and the leveling experience, a sticking point that wasn't mentioned at the showcase, and Blackburn affirmed that Bungie is still looking at making big changes to the leveling system, but what changes they may look like and when they'll arrive is still unclear. So we'd like to make major changes to the power system, he says. We looked at crafting as a scary thing to add to Destiny 2, and power is that times 10. There's some good stuff that power does for the game, and there's some really bad stuff that power is doing to Destiny right now. I think what you're going to do is see us do some experiments that are helping us understand if we're making the right long-term play for power and helping us dial that in. So if we're going to do this overhaul, can we have some really good data before we get there? I think if you're seeing systems like Guardian Ranks coming online, things like crafting and titles and seasonal challenges, and if we make big changes to this system, do we have the progression that we need in the game? Is there still stuff for you to do? Is there still a guide? So yeah, expect some weird experiments to be flying around through mid-year of Lightfall. Well, that is it for the interview from GamesRadar. Let me know in the comments what you think about Lightfall, and also don't forget to check out GamesRadar. Really, really interesting stuff and a really, really great interview, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Well, that is it for this interview with GamesRadar about Lightfall with the game director and assistant general manager of Destiny 2. And as always, thank you so much for watching or listening. For more, Destiny 2 content like this. Hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or you can check me out on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the videos on the channel. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.